Okay, welcome back. So this is going to be the part about mixing the drums. Let's get right to it. We're going to start with the kick and what I did with the kick. I mean, I've basically explained it in the previous one, but we'll go over it again. My views on mixing drums, especially for hip hop, are that the less mixing you have to do, the better. I think the more mixing and the more effect you have to apply to something, that means you just picked a bad sound. I mean, sometimes, there's exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, I try to avoid over mixing and, five different types of limiters and two EQs and reverbs and trying to change the frequency of the kick too much, auto-tune or whatever. Just for starters, pick a good sound. I picked a good sound, I believe. But all this time you've been hearing it with the effect already applied. Now, what I've been trying to do in this beat is try to get a kind of punchy feeling. I'll show you a little bit of the actual beat. If you see that, this is a sampled beat. I will play the beat later on. But basically, the sample has an old punchy kind of bass, which doesn't have too much in the low end. And I wanted to keep that punchy, warm feeling. So what I decided to do is get rid of the low end from the kick, simply because it makes the kick not just more punchy, but it adds to that warm, old school, feeling. So this is what the kick would sound like without the EQ that I applied. Now with the EQ, without, you can hear in the very low end there is a sub-bassy kind of frequency. To me, I found that dirty for the purpose of this beat, so I simply got rid of it. You don't always have to do it this way. Sometimes you can add punch to the kick by raising some frequencies in the 1K, 2K area. Again, I'm not going to tell you to overmix your beats. It's better if you can find a good sound, because the more you're mixing your beats, especially the more you are raising things in an equalizer, the more you are adding extra volume. And adding extra volume takes away space that could be used by other instruments and other sounds in the mix. So generally speaking, try to be minimal about it. It's not about, how good your curves look, how many fancy little, things like this you can get so that your EQ looks professional or whatever. None of that. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the sound in the end. So don't get too bogged down on the details. There's a lot of things about equalization that I couldn't tell you. But there's a lot of things at the same time that people can tell you who are very technical, but they can't make a song that's listenable. And the goal here is to show you how to make something that people will put on their MP3 player or their iPod and listen to. So let's move on to the second two, which are the shaker and hat. All right, so it's this part of the beat. Actually, let's put the kick in just so you get some context. Yep. Again, so what did I do in the mixing in this one? For starters, let's take all the effects off and it'll become pretty clear. So actually the effects are off, except the panning. So let me take the panning away, and then I'll explain one by one why I did everything. So now let's listen. This is no effects. That's pretty clear. That made it obvious. Okay, so let's start with panning. Why did I pan one shaker about 45-50% to the left and the tambourine hi-hat kind of thing to the right? Yeah, so, okay, this is a bit more of a theoretical concept, because if your speakers are bad, or if you're not used to listening from a sound engineer's perspective, you might not understand. Okay, picture that there's a ball in front of you, and you're looking at it directly. Now, when sounds are in the center, when all of them are centered, when all of them are in the middle in terms of the panning here, when None of them are to the left or to the right. It's basically like all the sounds are coming at you from the center of the ball. Now, maybe I should draw a ball to show this. Okay, this won't look like a ball. This will look like a circle. But when all your sounds are centered, they're all coming from down the middle like this. And it's a very thin kind of sound that you're getting. Now, generally speaking, you keep the bass down the middle here. But if you want to get a sense of, oh, this instrument's a bit further away from me than the other one, this spacious feeling, the way you do that, one of the ways that's really simple and, you're not putting too many effects on either, is panning. So now imagine that this is our kick and our bass, because usually we center those. And then here you have one hi-hat. Here you have another hi-hat. Even if that's not what a real drummer would be like, because a real drummer's hi-hats would be here if you were facing them. But yeah, so you have one hi-hat here, another hi-hat here. And what this does is, because imagine that this is a ball again, not a circle. These are a little bit further away from you than these are. This is how you can create space without, adding too much reverb or delay or just generally post-processing effects. It's really good if you want to make your song feel like a more professional kind of song. And that's why we did the panning. Now, moving on to the reverbs and EQs. What did I do on the EQ here? Okay, nothing. That's just a control EQ. But the reverb really makes this. So again, we'll play it without the reverbs. It sounds dead. I mean, it could pass in a beat. But if you want to add some life, a little bit of reverb, not a lot, on both of them. Now you hear the difference. Yeah. This, combined with the panning, creates that nice sense of spaciousness. This is one of those things that's really difficult to explain in concrete terms. It's something you have to train your ears for. But remember the ball analogy, because it really helped me. Okay. So now let's move on to the ornamental hats, which are going to be pattern 4, 5, and 6, I believe. Yep. So what effects did we apply? Most of this was tapering off the low end on the hi-hats. Yep. Now we're going to take these effects off. Listen carefully to the low end of the hi-hat. Now it's taken back off. So with these EQs that I've applied, you don't really hear as much of the stick of the hi-hat. This kind of goes against the principles of trying to make natural drums, because natural drums do have those lower frequencies. However, I personally don't like them. I don't like those lower frequencies in my beat, because to me it takes away from the cleanliness and the brightness. If you listen, I use a lot of bright sounds, like the tambourine on the shaker, for example. That tambourine is a bright sound. There's a tambourine on my clap as well, which you will hear later, separated. And I didn't want to take away from that bright feeling when I was doing this. Sometimes you will want to keep the dark, the lower frequencies if you're going for a kind of grimy sort of feel of a beat. Most definitely that's what you're going to do. But for this one, you always got to try to keep your purpose in mind. And it will come with time, just automatically knowing what you want. If you just keep making beats, keep plowing away, keep making projects and developing your own style. But this is just a guideline that I use. Start with this guideline, and when you're confident enough to branch off for sure. Other than that, I didn't apply any EQ on it. Now, why didn't I apply, sorry, not EQ, I didn't apply any reverb. Why didn't I apply any reverb? Because we have a tambourine loop. And this tambourine loop is the main part of these hats to me. The ornamental hi-hats are just supporting the tambourine loops. Just adding a little bit of beef. Anyway, I skipped too far ahead. Yeah, so that's the hi-hats. Clap time. Yeah, it should be pretty obvious that I stuck a reverb on there. What did I do as far as the EQ? Okay, so you may, if I put the EQ without cutting off any frequencies, you may not really hear much difference. That's because there is not. The reason I cut this is because sometimes in claps and snares, you get really, really quiet frequencies that don't by themselves, you pretty much can't hear them because they're so quiet in the lower register. The problem is if there is a frequency in an area where you don't want it, and I really hate things clashing in the 20 hertz, 50 hertz area because that's the easiest place for frequencies to clash. Then when you have other elements in that area, that's when you start to get a little bit of mud. So this is more of a cut just in case something is there. Generally speaking, a snare shouldn't have any sounds here. That's the kicks and basses job. Now, I raised the high end just a little bit because, as I was saying earlier, I wanted to go for a bright, summery kind of feel in this beat. So if we take that off and put it back up. The difference, again, it's minute, it's little, it's nothing special. But it's those little things and then a tambourine with some warm reverb on it. It's the sum of all things that will add up for you. Not raising your clap to... Because now when I'm listening to that, I go, oh yeah, this guy put an effect on it. And it's too clear, too easy to see. Generally speaking with equalization, one tip I got was, unless you're doing something for a specific effect, don't raise your frequency above 6 decibels-ish. Because beyond that point, I mean, again, exception to every rule, but generally speaking, when you start raising things beyond 6, you start to get the unnatural feeling. You start to get that, oh, this is the first time the guy's used an equalizer kind of vibe. So some of little effects as opposed to one effect to rule them all or whatever. Now let's take the reverb off. Let's look at the actual reverb because I haven't looked at the plugins so far. So if you'll notice, it's very little of the reverb itself. The 4% here, this is how much of the effect is applied in terms of volume relative to the sound without it. And the decay is the time, how long the reverb lasts before it fades away. What generally people do at the beginning is they put too much reverb on a sound. This, without fail, usually happens. A lot of times I would have said that I've put too much reverb on this already, but in the context of this beat, and you've always got to do everything in the context of the beat as a whole, or the song as a whole, it was okay. And again, this adds that space, that air, if you will. A real drummer who is inside a room with acoustics or whatever, they don't really have to apply too many effects because they already have a room, an ambience. The human ear can't really actively hear it unless you're trained to hear it, but you do feel it, if you will. And things like reverb, things like panning add to that. Really, that's pretty much all I have to say on the clap, because it's a really good sound. And if you pick good sounds, you are eliminating a lot of the work for yourself. Moving on to the tambourine on the clap. Again, this one, it's pretty heavily reverberated. It's a long sound, it's reverberated. The sound was good, I didn't have to do anything with the EQ. Actually, let's play in relation to the clap, because it's not a sound by itself. So this is what the clap sounds like by itself. And now look at the brightness added by that tambourine. It's that pingy, smiley kind of sound. And this is something that you can easily do just by finding those kinds of sounds. Like I really like putting tambourines on my snares. Sometimes if I'm just doing hi-hats and the hi-hat is on the same beat as the snare, it's going to be fine. That's all you need. And don't feel that you always have to use a tambourine on snares or whatever. Sometimes you're going for a much darker feel. If you're making a kind of, I don't know, say you're trying to make a Mobb Deep kind of beat, you're not going to use a snare that sounds like this, of course. But yeah, just really quickly in the reverb. This is the standard setting, except for the low cut. Let's look at what I did there. So what this did is just made sure that the actual reverberated sound that's bouncing off is not too low. Again, the reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to protect those low frequencies from having too much things happening. Yeah. Moving on. The perks. Yep. So the effects on them, again, it's just reverb. Let's take it away. You hear that? That's dead. That sounds like a MIDI pattern. And the reverb here, I mean, I just adjusted it going by ear. There is no rule for things like perks and ornaments. Snares, I guess there are some degree of, not really rules, but guidelines you can keep to, which is don't make it ridiculous. But with perks, it's really just what sounds good to you. You see, for example, I upped the decay here. And that wouldn't work for me, but let's say we were making a more of an ambient beat. That would definitely work. Let's go back to where it was. Yeah. And you'll see as well, I'm not using really any fancy plugins. Everything that I'm doing here, you could do with FL Studio native plugins. The equalizer that I'm using, you could do that with the FL Studio equalizer, no problem. So it's not a matter of plugins. The reason I'm using the Fab Filter EQ is because I like having the option to just do this. Double click anywhere, and now I have the curve. As opposed to with the FL EQ, where I can't just double click and make another curve. I have to disable them here or enable them, and that's too much hassle for me. But other than that, this equalizer can do everything that the Fab Filter one can. So don't really worry about that too much. It's not so much about the plugins as it is about what you can do with them. Perk. Now, my favorite part, the tambourine loop. Again, I just turned off the reverb and it dies. This is the standard reverb setting. I did nothing to change it. I literally just turned it on. Because it works. That's all you need sometimes. And it all goes back to that point about good sounds eliminate unnecessary processing. So sound selection is definitely important. Now, let's put all the parts back in one by one. Yeah. Now for the last effect, the secret ingredient, if you will. This is Maximus. Maximus is FL Studio's native multiband compressor. What this does is you can separate sound into different bands of frequencies, so lows, mids, and highs, and compress them separately as opposed to compressing the whole sound file. Let's take it off and just play the drums. As you can tell, a lot of the punch is gone. A lot of the punch is gone. But with this one, now you have punch in that warm frequency in this area here. Sorry, about 100 to 2K. What did I do here? Honestly, I just selected the punchy drums 2 or 3 preset. Don't be afraid to go after presets. Again, most of these tutorials I'm supposed to start telling you what the pre and post gain knob does and what the optimal threshold is when you're trying to compress the low frequencies. And what you'll find is most of the people who know this stuff really well are incapable of making a song that is listenable. So really, if you can go with a preset and the preset does what you want, go with it. Now, if you have £50 or $50, whatever you're from, to invest yourself to send it to a mastering engineer, do that, because a person who does mastering will be able to do it better than you can. You can do your own mixing. If you have monitor speakers, it's even a better idea to do your own mixing. But generally, if you're doing any professional productions, if I was doing something professional, I would just take some money out of the piggy bank and send it to a professional for several reasons. One is I'm not as good as them. Second of all, even if I was, there is something that they call, I don't know, I think it's called first ear bias, which is where you've been sitting at a project so long that your emotional attachment to the project, as well as just hearing it too many times, it clouds the way you hear the beat. Now, if you send it to someone who hasn't heard it before, they're going to hear it as it is, not without the biases. So yeah, that's really the advice I have. What did I do on the equalizer? Raised this a tiny bit for warmth. Raised this a tiny bit for warmth. I mean, I can take them off. It's difficult to hear again, but try to listen to the tambourine for the difference. Okay, now it's off. Yeah. So this is it for the drums. I'm going to put all the parts back in. The reason I'm doing them one by one instead of just soloing and unsoloing, by the way, is because I've got a microphone turned on. And the microphone, if I solo something, the microphone will come off. And I won't be able to record. This is a really weird recording setup I've got here right now. So just to make sure everything is on. And now I'm actually going to show you how it sounds as part of the beat. Okay. And that's all you get for now. Yeah, so this is so far what I've got. The next video will be just a conclusion, tying up all the concepts that I've shown here, and more importantly than anything, hopefully trying to give you guys a mindset, because it's not just about technique. I have tried to produce in quite a few different genres, and I was extremely technique oriented, almost obsessed, thinking that, you know, if I learn everything about this, if I can learn how to use the Fruity Formula controller and, you know, use algebra to program my beats or whatever, that suddenly it's going to make me this magic producer. And really it's not. Really it's not. You could give Da Vinci the worst, cheapest, crappiest pencil imaginable, and he could paint a masterpiece. Or Michelangelo or whoever. Conversely, you could give me the fanciest, most automated super pencil and I couldn't draw a straight line with a ruler. So focus more on what you can do with what you have than trying to have more. Otherwise, it just becomes a game of hoarding, a game of I always need to learn more, I always need more synths, and you're always preparing for something that never comes. But anyway, that's more on that in the next part. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.